Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the show. Have you ever noticed that your cravings seem to change throughout the seasons? Our nutritional needs are affected by the time of year, climate, and even our geographical location. And in the practice of Chinese medicine, attuning ourselves to our environment and living in harmony with nature is fundamental to achieving optimal health. Today we're here with Ellen Goldsmith, a licensed and board-certified acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist, and author of the book Nutritional Healing with Chinese Medicine. Before we get to the interview with Ellen, here's a quick reminder to make sure that you're subscribed to this show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find my original music, including the award-winning album Swamp Thing, by looking up Abel James on Apple or Spotify. And you can also find some of my music videos and clips from the live shows in Texas and beyond, and even 360 VR videos on my Abel James YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. All right, on to this show with Ellen. On this episode, we chat about how to identify food sensitivities and improve digestion with ancient principles from Chinese medicine, the concept of qi or vitality in foods, and emphasizing locally grown, seasonal whole foods with a diverse flavor profile, physical techniques and exercises to build and maintain vigor and vitality, how to include all 5 flavors in every meal to feel more satisfied, why eating dinner for breakfast can help avoid cravings for unhealthy snacks later in the day, and much, much more. Let's go hang out with Ellen. Welcome back, folks. Ellen Goldsmith is a nationally board-certified licensed acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist who has been practicing, teaching, and consulting in the field for the last 30 years. Ellen is the author of the book Nutritional Healing with Chinese Medicine and the founder of Pearl Natural Health. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ellen.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you, Abel.
So in going through some of your work and some of your past interviews, I've heard you say before that you were a lousy vegetarian. Let's start right there with some of your personal history as it relates to eating.
Oh, yeah, it started way back when I was in college, and I read a woman named Adele Davis. I don't know if you know of her. She wrote a book, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a vegetarian, but I really liked cheese, and I was. I lived in New York. I was a dancer, and I used to go to this great shop, Murray's Cheese Shop, which was just a teeny little place off of Bleecker Street, and grab a huge block of cheese, and that was what I ate, along with fruit and nuts. And I didn't cook very much, and I was just a young upstart dancer just trying to make it a go of it, but I really wasn't feeling very good. And I kept trying to figure things out, and it took me a while, but I finally met someone who helped me. So things
And then
shifted.
and you transitioned to macrobiotic after that.
I did. I was just feeling lousy. My energy wasn't good. I was a dancer. I needed my energy. I needed my body. And about 6 people told me, hey, you got to go see this woman named Shizuko Yamamoto. She was a semi-blind, barefoot shiatsu practitioner and macrobiotic teacher. And I went to her, and I got a treatment from her, and I just felt like I had been brought back into my body in a way that I had never experienced. And I sat with her, and she said, you eat too much fruit and cheese. And I said to her, how do you know that? She said, I just know.
Wow.
And she told me you need to eat grains and beans and vegetables, and you need to cook your food. And I said, okay, whatever you say, because I just had felt so extraordinary. And I went back to her a month later, and I said, after our treatment, I had been changing things a little bit. I said, will you teach me? And she said, no, you should go study macrobiotics. And that was a way of a philosophy, really a way of life, but a way of eating that used yin and yang in a kind of different way than Chinese medicine uses it. George Osawa created it, and it kind of flipped on its head a little bit. But in that place, the Macrobiotic Institute, Kushi Institute in Brookline, Mass., I really learned about energetics of food and cooking and yin and yang in the body. And it totally transformed my energy. It transformed my body and my perception of things. And it really was the foundation. And it really is plant-based eating and cooking your food. So it's been a great foundation that has evolved over decades because I've changed, and my needs have changed. So I think that's the most important thing. Eating is dynamic. It's not a fixed thing.
Right. So how did that lead you to, I guess, where you are today, to skip ahead in time considerably, uh, teaching food as medicine and the how to balance that for every person, as you mentioned, is that food is dynamic and diet is dynamic. So it's not something that you just kind of have nailed down. It's something that you need to keep attention on and practice intention with. So how do you manage that today, and what does it look like for you and the folks who you consult with?
Yeah, I when the first part of the question was, teaching food is medicine. I'm an acupuncturist and an herbalist, and people come to me with problems and they want them solved, of course. And I, work with people and try to help them solve them through acupuncture, through herbs, lifestyle, etc. But we eat every day. We never forget to eat.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes if we're stressed or upset, perhaps we do, but we don't forget to eat. So that makes it the most powerful medicine because I can prescribe herbs, supplements to people, but people will forget,
Yeah.
to take them. They'll come to me for acupuncture and then they'll stop, but they'll always eat.
Hmm.
So, it is the most powerful medicine. So why not learn how to embrace it and use it in a way where we can cultivate our own inner knowing, our own power of observation. How does food make us feel? If you don't feel well, let's look at the food and let's start there. So that's, how I approach it with people because, you know, when people change their food and they feel better, they go, whoa, that was so easy. But we know changing what we eat is the hardest thing because we have emotional attachment, we have habits, we have preferences, we have cultural traditions that we need to honor, all of these things. So, it's a process. It's not like, I can give people fixed ways of eating, but then they change and they have a different needs. So why not teach people how to fish, so to speak, right? How to, make their own choices and they know that that's good for them.
I'm curious, as you've been practicing for many years now, have you developed some intuition for knowing when someone's eating too much cheese or not enough meats or something like that?
Well, in Chinese medicine, we ask these 10 questions, and they go everything from sleep to energy to digestion to elimination to thirst, all these kinds of things, hormonal issues, etc. And, as you learn, as you listen to people, you can kind of go, okay, that's an imbalance there. Let me see what might be feeding that, So, certainly, I think eating a lot of cheese can really, people can have digestive issues. Women can have painful menstrual cramps. People can have allergies. People, all these things. So these are kind of keys. I always kind of look for the one thing that we might take out of someone's way of eating because that might be really getting in the way of them getting better. We call it an obstacle to cure. If I talk to people about foods and I give them a list and I go, so if I said, you can't eat this food right now, and you would go, no, no, I can't live without it. I already know that that's something that's probably maybe getting in the way of how they're feeling. And there are a couple of big culprits, usually dairy, wheat, sugar, alcohol. Those are the really, really big ones. For some people, it's eggs and etc. So,
Yeah, and how do you identify that aside from what you just mentioned? What are some other ways that people can identify the foods that don't agree with them? I've heard you say that um, I think it was peppers don't work well for you in particular, and everyone kind of has something like that or a few things like that, right?
yeah. Oh, you did your research. Yeah, I think you have to pay attention to your body. That's the thing is that this is not a culture where we learn to pay attention to how we feel. Or to our senses. If someone eats something and then they feel like, the food's not moving through me, or I feel bloated, or I'm irritable, or I'm tired, or my nose is running and my eyes are itching. These are all signs that what you just ate is not agreeing with your system because you're not being able to metabolize it. So I always try to say, like, because it's really hard to say, "Oh, don't ever eat cheese again," or "Don't eat any more wheat," but if you cut it out for, like, 6 to 8 weeks and you look at how to create alternatives for yourself, because if you cut out cheese, you're missing a lot of salt and fat. So give your how can we kind of give you foods that will satisfy you? How can you make something creamy? You can use like cashew cream or tofu cream, things like that. So you have to give people that kind of mouth feel and body feel that they feel satisfied, but looking for substitutes. But if you do it for 6 to 8 weeks and things start to shift or improve, then you know that that food is the culprit, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you fall off the wagon in those 6 to 8 weeks, I always just tell people that's okay. Just pay attention to how you feel. Like, do you feel more lethargic? Is your digestion off? Are your allergies aggravated? Did you get a headache? These are things to tell you. And it's not that food is bad. It's just that all of us are different. So we can't metabolize things. Even healthy foods are not all good for all people.
Yeah. And it can be a little bit tricky, and that's why elimination diet is so important over the course of time, because even if you do have a problem with, let's stick to the example of cheese or maybe eggs, it's not always one of those things where you eat it and then immediately you notice that your nose starts running and you get inflamed and a big fat face, or you start to lose energy. It's one of those things where over the course of a few days it kind of adds up for some of these foods, and it takes a few days or even a few weeks for your body to work through that, get it out of there, and then all of a sudden you do start feeling better. So that's why it's important to kind of do this more intentionally than just trying to like skip cheese for lunch one day or something like that and
Yeah, it
expect
doesn't work
right.
if you skip cheese for lunch one day. You really have to give your body a chance to change. I mean, it takes 120 days for your blood to transform. It takes 7 days for things to move through your system. So, it takes a while. We have to be patient with ourselves as well as the process of it, because like I said, changing food it's a hard thing for folks. And but when you're not feeling well and if food can make the difference, I say go for it. Sometimes we need stronger medicine, but if it can make the difference and you feel good, why not?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's easier than we think once we try other things. Like for example, maybe you were craving cheese, or I do sometimes, not so much for the cheese itself, but your body has and your brain has learned that there's a source of salt there and you're deficient in salt that day, or you need salt from some other source. And so if you replace that with maybe a bit of sea vegetables or a nice hearty broth or something like that, maybe it's not so hard to avoid cheese on those days that you kind of satiate the craving that is actually at play in your body, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's some people who have really like severe kind of allergies to milk, really where they just don't, I mean, just digestive wise, they'll either get the runs or they get a stomach ache or, kids with chronic earaches and things like that. But, like I was always allergic to dairy as a kid even, but, I still drank milk and I had allergies. And when I gave it up, I got rid of my allergies. But now I can eat some sheep or goat fermented, and because the fat molecules are smaller, so it's easier for the liver to metabolize it. So, I'm not into deprivation for people. I say if like someone, like you said, like, oh, if I just want to, I'm at a party and there's some beautiful whatever cheese there, I'm going to, okay, see how you feel. And if you feel okay and you've been on a big elimination of dairy, it doesn't mean it's okay for you, but it means, okay, good, you enjoyed that, enjoy yourself. I mean, food's got to be, big thing about food is pleasure and the pleasure, the sensory pleasure, the mouth feel, the pleasure of sharing food with people, the pleasure of creating food for people or for yourself. There has to be joy and pleasure in it. It's not something to be afraid of.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about chi or vitality in foods and the foods that can add to that or subtract from it. Some have more than others. Some foods you could aptly describe as dead foods, and many of us have been eating that way in the standard American diet for many years now. And so the difference in the way that you feel can be extreme in some cases when you start adding some food that actually has some vitality into your diet.
Well, there's kind of levels here, right? Like the dead food, like anything that's packaged, that's, created in a plant, it's going to have a lot less chi. And for those of people out there who don't know what chi is kind of the potential for energy and vitality. In Chinese, the Chinese character, it's not the pot of rice, but it's the steam that emanates from the rice,
Yeah, love that.
And it's like if you garden, you have a bunch of seeds that you've gotten from the same source, and you put those seeds in the ground, and they get the same water, the same light, the same soil. But some of those seeds grow vigorously, and some of them like don't grow at all or grow kind of stunted. We would say that's the chi of the seed, the potential for growth, the potential for movement, and all of that. So, when we're eating foods that have been created in a plant in with things that we can't pronounce, there's not going to be a lot of chi in that food because chi comes from the sun, it comes from the earth, it comes from the soil, it comes from the nutrients in the soil. I mean, I think Tufts University a number of years ago found that foods grown in organic soils had more nutrients, dense nutrients than industrial foods. Of course, it'd be great if we could all eat organic foods, that don't have pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, et cetera. But there are certain foods that you want to just make sure that you eat that are organic or not used, like we have a farmer in our farmers market. They're not organic because you have to go to certification. But on all of their things, they said no pesticides, no herbicides, no fungicides, not a zip. And I know that farmer, and I know his food is good, and it's vital and it's got vitality to it. So it's always good to, when you're going shopping, looking for vegetables and fruits that have a vitality to them, not a wax cover to them. But I don't know. I think I've cultivated this over the years. I can just tell, like, when food is singing, when it has some
Yes.
chi.
Yeah.
So you're going to find that at farmers markets. You're going to find that in produce sections. If your food is wilted and kind of sad looking and limp, that's not going to really be so great for you, but it's not going to be bad either because it's better to eat fruits and vegetables than to eat all that packaged food. So, we even say that the climate and the geography and the soil is going to indicate the chi of the food. And then what you do with it has a lot to kind of enhance or change it. So you can, in Chinese nutritional therapy, we talk a lot about foods that are going to be warming or cooling. So you can take a food and you cook it and it breaks it down a little bit. It warms up its nature and it's easy to digest, because it is slightly broken down. Um, and at different stages of our life, we need different types of energy. Like, kids have boundless energy, but we need to nourish um, their growth. We need to nourish their immune system. We need to nourish their nervous system, etc. As we get older, childbearing years need different kinds of energy for women. Going into perimenopause and menopause needs different types of nourishment. Aging and elderly people need different types of measurement because the chi, as we grow it from a kid, it's like, and then we kind of plateau, and then and then if you're healthy and you kind of keep cultivating your energy, you don't go like down, but the plateau gets a little just more even. And so we just have to learn how to nourish ourselves, our own vitality and chi in different ways at different stages of life.
Yeah, and so the concept of chi in foods or the aliveness of foods I think a tomato represents that really well. Leafy greens do too, but tomatoes, to me, if you just get them at some normal store, someone throws it on a burger, it can be mealy and kind of tasteless and squishy and what have you. And a lot of people kind of think that that's what a tomato is and haven't had, you know, anything that's much different than that. But if it's grown in your own backyard or someone's backyard and just plucked off the vine, or you grab it from a farmer's market, instead of having like one mild kind of mealy texture, one mild flavor. You get a dozen different flavors all at once. There's sweetness, it's tart, it's bitter. There's a whole lot going on, and it's a lot
Yeah.
easier to fall in love with food when you engage that mechanism of trying to get the freshest food you possibly can, even if it's just a handful of them, and really trying to taste it and enjoy it and notice those nutrients coming into your body.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important point, Abel. I think if you can eat food in season, it's going to be much more flavorful because it's been picked right away. You're eating it right away. So there's a lot more flavor, nutrients, and chi in the food itself. And all small towns have some kind of farmer's market. It's really interesting, you know, um, or maybe your friends have a garden. I mean, where I live in Portland, Oregon, a city, but my neighbors were always kind of exchanging food when foods are growing in people's gardens. So that's a really good point to eat foods that are in season so that they're fresh. Maybe a rancher, to get your meat from, or like a fisherman to get your fish from. Um, but also that thing of really taking your time to eat, and enjoying your food. I think so many times it's just kind of like it's kind of like filling up your car. But we're not cars, we're humans. And food, again, it's a pleasurable and sensorial experience. And having that fresh food is really going to give us that.
And you might not chase after food volume so much if you have the
Mhm.
quality there, right? if
Yes.
if if you really can taste just a little bit of wonderful fresh food, then you don't need to go after these enormous portions, which we all know get us in trouble.
Yeah, they do. They do. But that's because there's not a lot of flavors. So we just, we keep looking. We're not doing anything wrong. We're kind of, our bodies are looking for something, but when you have, in Chinese medicine and Chinese nutritional theory, we talk about the five flavors. It's salty, sour, sweet, not sugar, but sweet, like in carrots and pears and squashes and sweet potatoes, sour, wait, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, which I'll talk about in a minute, and pungent or aromatic. And if you have all of these five flavors on your plate or in a meal, you're going to feel a lot more satisfied than just having like a meal of all salty food or all sour. You don't eat a lot of sour food or all sweet food. You're just going to look for something because our bodies naturally seek balance. So, a great way when people are cooking, like let's say you're making just for simple sake, rice. Okay. And I know if you're like looking into burning fat, you're not going to be like eating a lot of rice, but grains are good. But it can be kind of bland. So how do you give it a different dimension? You can put a cinnamon stick in it, or mustard seeds, or black sesame seeds, or cardamom. You can put different aromatic herbs, then brings like a different action and a different kind of experience of the food. I think herbs and spices are really, really important in our cooking because, again, it's that sensorial thing. It also helps our digestion. It can warm us up. It can activate our senses. It can kind of clear our minds. I mean, there's a lot that we can do. So, using herbs and spices in cooking are really, really beneficial.
What about this phrase? Chinese medicine is rooted in nature and the order of change. What does that mean to you, or what does that mean exactly?
Well, there's only one thing we're sure of, and that's change. Everything does change, even though many of us don't want things to change. And all you have to do is live your life through the seasons, and you see change all the time. So, the observation of nature is what goes on outside goes on inside of us too. Sometimes it's too hot out there. We can be too hot. Sometimes it's too cold. We can feel too cold. Sometimes it's too damp out there. We feel lethargic or like foggy headed. Sometimes it's too dry and, we have um, headaches or we have dry cough or things like that. So, if we're not living in harmony with our environment, well, I can see what's happening on the planet. We're not anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But it's an opportunity for us to live more in harmony with the environment, to reflect what's going on outside. Now, when it's cold, we don't want to be cold inside. So the balance is we'll do cooking that more warms us, that warms our innards, so to speak, so that we can store that energy to counter the cold. Whereas in the summer, especially this last summer, it was wow, you guys in Texas, the heat,
It was
was just,
brutal. Yeah.
uh, I mean, heat is the biggest killer in environmental disasters in the world. So how do we keep our bodies cool? And we don't keep it cool with ice and ice cream, because when we take in cold, really cold food into our body says, whoa, I can't metabolize that. I can't digest that. I'm going to warm that up.
Right.
So it has your body, your stomach has to generate more heat, more digestive fire, more stomach acid to help break down cold foods. So when it's hot out, we have to have foods, of course, that are cooling, which of course are leafy green vegetables, cucumbers, melons, things like that. But we also have to make sure that we don't cool ourselves down so much that when autumn comes, we can't warm up. So that's why, people have watermelon. They put a little cayenne spice on top of the watermelon in certain, cultures. I mean, because it just kind of, you want to get a little heat in there, but not a lot, you know. So by eating, by being more in balance with the season, with the climate, we not only change the food we eat, we change our activities. Like now, well, as we're speaking, we're in autumn, or if when this comes out, if it's in winter, we're going more inward. We're That's more yin energy. We say in Chinese medicine, more calm, quiet. We want to kind of take that time to cultivate our inner life a little bit. Summer is about being out there and being active, but autumn and winter is about coming in. So if we're still trying to you know, run out there and run marathons and, be super active, it's counter to our bodies need to rest too, not only bears, but humans, we need to rest. So I think by paying attention to our external environment and trying to feel more in balance with with ourselves, it's an opportunity to, I think, be more receptive to change and be more able to move with change. And that's so important in life because nothing stays the same.
Hmm. It's bringing to mind how much, for my wife and I, our cravings changed when we moved. We spent the last 5 years or so up in the mountains of Colorado at like 8,000 feet. Very different climate than Austin, Texas. Um, and the way that we were eating up there and what we naturally wanted to eat was fundamentally different than what we wanted when we came down to Texas. And also, what we could get away with, so to speak, changed in each place. And I remember when we first came back and smelled the mesquite smoke and the briskets that had been cooking for 12 plus hours and all the rest of that. We were just like, that is what my body wants right now. And we went on a brisket tear for a while there. Um, and then that completely stopped. It completely went away for many, many months. Pretty much the whole summer season. We're like, that doesn't sound good at all. Even like the smell of it didn't do the same sort of things to us. But now that it's cooling down a little bit again, it's interesting how I can feel that changing. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about how, uh, not just with the seasons, but also when you change places and change your environment, sometimes that can lead to changes in what your body needs and what you naturally crave as well.
Yeah, absolutely changes. I mean, being at 8,000 feet, it's drier, it's colder up there. You're going to probably, I would think you would have wanted a little bit more fat up there,
Definitely. Yeah.
to keep you warm.
Hmm.
Um, and your blood, you make a lot more red blood cells up there because the oxygen levels are a little bit lower, right? And when you come down to the low country of Austin, Texas, which is hot and humid, you have to make sure you're not building up a lot of what we call in Chinese medicine dampness inside. You have to make sure that what you're eating and how you're eating is not accumulating or slowing your digestion down. And so it's really important, I would say, in those humid countries, that climates, that you have some foods that, again, more vegetables, more dark leafy greens, that are really helping that fiber and just moving things through. In Chinese herbalism, we use something called Job's tears or koiks, which is a gluten-free barley, and that's really good for clearing dampness from the body. Eating a lot of dairy and baked goods, et cetera, in a hot, humid climate is not going to do you a whole bunch of good. Um, Bitter greens are good because they help to kind of remove dampness. And I said earlier, I'm going to talk about bitter in a minute because in this country, bitter, we know bitter from coffee, chocolate, and beer.
Yeah. Right.
you know, but there's a whole other world out there of bitter greens and dandelion greens and cardoons and yellow grapefruit, white asparagus. Um, Cultures, Asia and also the African diaspora, use bitter melon gourd, which is a very, very bitter, 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 bitter food, but delicious. And bitter helps to clear heat and clear dampness from the body. So broccoli, any kind of rabe, broccoli rabe is very good. Escarole, all the chicories, all of these are going to be, that flavor helps to kind of purge, move fluids out and down, like through urination. So, when you're in a damp climate, you want to make sure that you're countering that dampness by not feeding it with all the kind of greasy, fried, creamy foods. So with that brisket, maybe you'll have like some radish with it, some scallion, something like that to count, bitter greens with it, lots of vegetables with it. Um, and then you can use these bitter greens to help kind of clear some of that heat as well.
And pickled sour vinegar, kimchi, that sort of thing can be really useful. But a lot of people kind of miss the boat on adding that in combination with big fatty meat based meals.
Well, I mean, all kinds of fermented foods, there's traditions of it in every single culture for thousands and thousands and thousands of years because that's a way of preserving food when there weren't refrigerators and ice boxes and things like that. And that fermentation, that lactobacillus is so beneficial for our gut, for our digestive system, and that digestive system and the immune system are inextricably linked. Um, in my book, I have a whole bunch of different kinds of pickles that people can make, or quick kind of kimchi things. If you don't like spicy kimchi, you can even take, if you have some kimchi at home, you can take a little bit of the juice and mix it in with some greens, like even with dandelion greens, chopping them up really, really fine, mixing them, kind of massaging them, letting them sit for a bit, or taking radish tops and cutting those up, washing them first, of course, and then mixing them with salt and letting them sit for a day, and then mixing them in with some like steamed vegetables. So you can bring that sour, salty kind of light fermentation to even very simple vegetable dishes. It gives it a little bit more, I don't know, pizzazz, but also increases digestibility and feeds the microbiome, which is, of course, like I said earlier, linked with our immunity and so much of our own health. So yeah.
How about broths and congee? The first time I had congee, when we traveled to Asia, One of the reasons we went back to Asia a few times is for the food specifically because it's so radically different, so delicious. And it seems like even as it relates to soups and broths, they've kind of fallen out of fashion in the West in the past few decades, whereas it's still fundamentally a part of many cultures in the world for many reasons. So maybe you can talk about the value of broths and how much fun you can have with them as well. And a lot of people listening probably don't I have never tasted something like congee.
Yeah, well, congee is a rice soup, rice porridge. In Cantonese, it's called juk. But all cultures have porridges. Mexico, Italy has polenta. Eastern Europe has buckwheat groats. There's oat porridge, and what it is that you're cooking in congee anyway. You're cooking rice, but you can use millet. You can use any grain that you like. Um, so you're taking like a cup of rice and 12 cups of water, or you can mix that water with broth. You could do like 6 cups water, 6 cups broth, and you cook it very slow for like an hour or two. You can put it in a slow cooker, and you want it so that the rice is what we say indivisible. It's just one kind of mass. And what it is it makes it very easy to digest. So if you're recovering from an illness, or you have an elderly grandparent or parent who's like kind of not hungry, but they need some nourishment, is you can give them congee. And the beauty of congee is, if you remember in China, you get the congee and then there are all these different kinds of toppings, right? You can get pickles. You can use fish. You can use some meat. You can use cooked vegetables. You can put an egg on top. Some congees are cooked with some beans. We can cook congee with different herbal formulas for different cases. But in my book, Nutritional Healing of Chinese Medicine, I've organized all my recipes by season. So I have seasonal congees for every different season. So, like in winter, you might want to have a congee that scatters the cold, so to speak. So, you're doing a very simple rice congee, and I usually use like um, sweet brown rice or arborio rice in my congee. Sometimes I'll put millet in with it. Sometimes I'll put, like I said, koiks or Job's tears in with it as well, or lotus seeds, which are very kind of nutty, and we use them in Chinese herbal medicine, very good for the lung and the heart. And you can put that in, and then you can grate some ginger and squeeze some ginger juice on it and chop up some scallions. And so that ginger is really good for the digestion, for the stomach. It warms you up. The scallions also warm you up, but also helps disperse some of the cold. So you can kind of modify it. You can even have a delicious congee and just put some butter and honey on it, and that will help to kind of build the qi. So there's a lot of variety that you can get with congees. And I mean, if you're you're having some digestive distress, it's a really nice way to get nourishment without having your digestive system to work hard. And that's also for broths, cooking long term, whether you use, meat bones or vegetable broth. It's a beautiful recipe that the wonderful cookbook author Hannah Che wrote, Vegan Chinese Food. And she has this very beautiful, very, a lot of umami kind of vegetable broth with just daikon and celery and carrot and some soybean in it, that's cooked for long periods of time. So, cooking broth is very much like, it's like a nutritional IV that you're eating so
Yeah.
you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I just love broths, again, for that feeling of being nourished without having to like work hard at it.
Yes.
So I have salmon stock broths, vegetable broths, chicken broths, meat broths, in my freezer. And so, you can do that. And then you can either put them in large containers or small containers, just pull them out when you want them. And you'll have some ready, really nice, nourishing food. And then you can use broths as a foundation for more hearty kind of, or warming, nourishing soups. If you eat meat, you can put meat in it, or beans or vegetables, etc. So I think, the broth is, I come from an Ashkenazi Jewish background, and chicken soup was like the thing, right? Um, so there is something to that, and all cultures have it. And I think, especially when it's actually, soups are very good in summer because they're very, very hydrating. So if you're feeling dry, or, just, having soup is going to be so good for your system, in terms of hydration as well.
I found, yeah, being jet lagged, when you go from one hemisphere to the other, congee and broth was really a lifesaver because your cravings are all off. You might be craving the wrong food, or you're not hungry at all because it's the middle of the night for you or something like that. And having a broth in an instance like that, or a nice hearty savory soup really saved my life a few times, it felt like.
Yeah, and I think the revelation for me too, when I went to Asia, is that in Asia you eat dinner for breakfast.
Right.
So you're getting a lot of nourishment. In America and many other Western countries, in Europe, you eat sugar for breakfast,
Yeah.
or fat and,
Yeah.
greasy foods. And so that's like, sugar's going to like give you a boost for a second, and then you're going to crash, right? Um, but when you're eating dinner for breakfast, which we do a lot, and we did a lot when my daughter was growing up, soup for breakfast is one of the best breakfasts ever. Because again, you don't have to work hard to, break things down. It's easily absorbed. It's very nourishing, and it keeps your blood sugar nice and steady, you know, and you don't feel hungry at 9:30, like, oh, I need something. I need a donut. You know. So yeah, try dinner for breakfast, for your listeners. I really recommend it.
I love that. What about, foods when, it's cold season, or you might feel a little bug coming on, or maybe you're even under the weather already? How do you approach that?
Well, like I think sometimes things hit us really hard, like the COVID thing, people are just get down for the count. Um, but if you feel kind of under the weather, that's when you want to, again, be easy on your digestive system. So those are the good times for congee, for broths, for soups, vegetable. If you eat meat, I would eat more plant-based foods. Again, easy to digest, not spicy, not greasy, not fatty, not creamy. You want to remove any obstacle to cure, in that regard. You can, again, putting some ginger or some scallion in like a broth is very good because it can kind of help move things out of the body, because that pungent flavor we talk about in nutritional theory helps to kind of disperse heat and cold, etc. So I think it's really important to kind of stay away from those foods that are hard to digest, because your immune system is trying to fight something off, and eating more plant-based foods, cooked foods, orange juice, a lot of sugar in it. That's kind
Yeah.
of hard on the system.
Mhm. Now, I'm curious about this a little bit, to shift gears. As someone who grew up as a dancer, the relationship to chi, I would imagine, would be a little bit different than someone who is involved in something more static than that. Because in order to be, a talented, or kind of charismatic, magnetic dancer, you need to flow with the nature, the time, the audience, whatever it is. So, I'm curious, do you have any particular, um, unique take on how Westerners could more incorporate, chi into their movements?
Uh-huh. That's so beautiful. If there's a couple of things that I learned in my dance training, was to pay attention, like inside, you know, and how to use my breath to move things inside of me. this wasn't like what people are doing now, in terms of like breath practices. It's just like dance, you know, and, but you have to learn to pay attention to your body. And so I'm forever grateful for my dance training for that. I'm also forever grateful for learning how to sit up straight. Because when you do that and you breathe into your diaphragm, you get a lot more movement in your chest. You can release a lot of tension up here where we have a lot of input. You get a lot of massaging to your internal organs, which helps your general health. I think also in dance training, and like if you're an athlete too, I think you get this, you learn to pay attention to other people in your field, in your sphere, you know. So I think the greatest thing that I got from dance was learning how to pay attention. And I think internally and externally, because you have to learn to pay attention to your fellow, your compadres in your company. And you have to learn how to pay attention in a group to the people that you're presenting to, and how to kind of be with. It's it's a very spiritual kind of experience. And I would think people have that who are engaged in any kind of deep practice, whether it be athletic, dance, music, painting, writing. You get into a certain kind of flow. I think it's a certain kind of endorphin flow of sorts too. So I think what Chinese nutritional therapy, dietary therapy, the Chinese medicine also teaches us how to pay attention to nature around us, to pay attention to our own kind of senses and our own bodily senses and our own sense of energy and not having energy, or when we need to rest, learning how to have more balance in our own daily life, because that's what's about sustaining us, I think. And then there's the whole emotional component too, just what we go through in life and those traumas and how we, can help to untangle them and resolve them in our own bodies and our own lives too. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yes, that's beautiful. A beautiful way to answer it. I'm curious as well. In terms of movement practices, have you carried any exercise through to this day? And if you feel a little bit locked up or sore, or like, what does the movement practice look like for you?
Oh my gosh! I have to move every day,
Yeah.
and I move every day to move my energy. And I'm really aware of when my energy is stuck. I feel a little antsy, or I can feel depressed a little bit,
Mhm.
or I just feel kind of not clear in my head. So yeah, I move every day. I walk, I do qigong, I do yoga, I do strength training. I practice Pilates for like 25 years. I do something. I'm not I do the same thing every day kind
Right.
of person, Sometimes I wish I was, but I've grown to accept that I'm not. So I have a variety of movement, but I always make sure that I'm moving. And I also make sure that I do things that aren't that comfortable. You know what I mean? That I'm learning how to do things that I'm challenging myself a little bit.
Yeah.
Like in a few days, I'm going to walk the Cotswolds in England with a backpack on my back
Wow.
for like 102
Cool.
miles. I'm going, okay, and I'm looking at there like hills up and down. I'm not walking in the Himalayas. I've done that, but, yeah. So, I like to do things that challenge my own physicality because I feel more alive. And like, I guess, if we're alive, let's feel alive. That's
Yes.
why I eat well, because it's not because I want to be healthy. I do want to be healthy, but I feel good and I want to feel good and I want to feel vital and I want to feel engaged and I want to feel a flow in myself and with others and with the world, and in this crazy world, the more we can do that with ourselves, the more we can do that with others. And, it's just kind of like in the Tao Te Ching, it's like 1 grain, 10,000 grains. One ripple in the water goes out. So, I just want people to feel, health is our birthright. Most of us, if we're lucky, congenitally, we're born healthy, and it's not something to abuse. It's something to nurture. It's something to cultivate, because then it carries us into our aging years, and sometimes things happen. I mean, we don't get out of life alive. So, but we can live the best quality life that we can as long as we can. Sometimes people live a great quality life and they still get a terrible disease and die, or, I mean, so it's really about feeling alive, I think, and feeling happy and feeling a sense. Most of my patients, when I ask them what their goals are, besides the problem that they came here with, it's always people say, I want to feel more calm. I want to feel more balanced. And I think Chinese medicine can teach us that in our daily life. I think it's very accessible. It's, of course, the study of it is deep, and we can study it forever and ever, which we do, those of us, but it's available to us. Eat good food, as Michael Pollan said, mostly plants, not too much. Move your body every day to promote the flow of energy. Learn how to sleep well, or learn how to rest. Make sure that you rest well. And, learn practices that help to regulate the stressors and stresses of life.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. What a wonderful conversation. Ellen, what is the best place for people to find your work and your book as well?
Yeah. So my website is pearlnaturalhealth.com, pearlnaturalhealth.com. I'm on Instagram at Goldsmith Ellen. I'm on Facebook with my book name, Nutritional Healing with Chinese Medicine. I don't know if this looks like it's backwards, but
Looks good to me. Yeah.
And the book you can get it on bookshop.org. I like to promote my local bookshops, Powell's Books online, Amazon Books, Barnes and Nobles. You can get it anywhere, across the continents, Australia, England, and Poland. There's a Polish
Wow.
There's a Polish translation so far. So
Cool.
yeah, and I love to hear from people. People can contact me through my website, and I do consultations with people. I speak to organizations and teach. So I'm just happy to bring the word of health and good food out there into the world.
Wonderful. Well, we need more of you, and really appreciate you taking the time today, Ellen. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for promoting health and well-being too, Abel. It's a great
Of course.
job.